May we hear from More first, sir? You may proceed with your opening statement, and then we will proceed with PECO thereafter.
Yeah. Honorable Committee, good afternoon. I'm Roel Castro, the President of Monte Oro Electric and Power Company. More Electric made its application for franchise for the distribution of electricity in the city of Iloilo. If granted the franchise, More Electric is offering itself as an alternative to the existing franchise holder. We're currently beefing up our organization with competent people, and right now we are actually in the process of already hiring both technical and administrative people to run the new company. If given the chance to distribute electricity in the city of Iloilo, we are very confident that we can definitely improve the service to the consumers, as well as bring down the cost of electricity. When we speak of service improvement, we are referring to reliability, safety, as well as pricing, among others. Monte Oro, as a company, had the experience in the electric transmission business. If we recall, Monte Oro was a shareholder of National Grid Corporation of the Philippines when it was privatized. If you may, Mr. Chair, we just have a brief presentation.
How long is the presentation, sir?
Well, it would just take about 10 to 15 minutes.
I'll wait for the chairman to rule on that, but outside of the presentation, would that be your opening statement?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Sir, you mentioned alternative. Does that mean in your business model you can operate side by side with PECO, assuming there are no legal bars against it? You said alternative. Iba yung kapalit, ah. Alternatibo ba itong inaalok nyo o kapalit?
Well, to be specific, it is really a replacement to the existing shareholder, to the existing franchise holder.
Yes, because a DU is a natural monopoly, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Economies of scale will catch up with you if there is more than one player, right? Senator Riza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question to that quickly. Pero para sa, andito naman, Mr. Chair, ang ERC at saka NEA, no? Tama po ba?
Yes.
Could I ask, even if briefly, both agencies, in principle, is it economically feasible and or efficient for two entities to distribute power in the same service area? Posible po ba yun?
Maybe ask NEA? I think it's more NEA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable members of the committee. This is actually the second time that there is an applicant in the distribution system business wanting to enter into the distribution business. And this issue was actually raised in the other franchise hearings, whether two or more distribution utilities can operate in the same franchise area from the legal standpoint as well as from the technical standpoint. Because there is actually a provision in the EPIRA that the franchise is an exclusive one. And secondly, maintaining two distribution system in a single or the same franchise area may be somewhat complicated, unlike in generation business. And actually, this issue was actually raised in another applicant. That's why this issue has to be raised on the legal issue, which is exclusivity of the franchise, and secondly, on the technical feasibility of having two or more utilities in one franchise area.
So, sir, the answer is no. Legally and economically, no. Hindi pwedeng dalawa.
Somewhat
Wag somewhat, sir.
difficult.
Yes or no? I mean, legally,
no.
under EPIRA, And economically, it's not viable.
I fully agree, sir.
Mr. Chairman, so as a follow-up question to that, although earlier the good Deputy Administrator was saying somewhat, so maybe there can be inputs from the legislature how to really clarify that issue definitively. And I'm glad also to see our Chair of the Senate Committee on Energy here to clarify that issue, not only for the pertinent franchise application, but for other situations similar that may crop up in the future. I was also going to ask, did the NEA and ERC attend the hearings in the House vis-a-vis the extension of the existing distributors franchise? And is it true that the ERC and NEA did not interpose any objections to the extension of that existing distributors franchise? And I ask this question, Mr. Chair, because with my very first question, ang actually nilulook forward to ko, tinitignan ang posibleng solusyon sa isang medyo problematikong sitwasyon ngayon. So, tama po ba, NEA, ERC, hindi kayo nag-interpose ng objection sa extension ng kasalukuyang distributors franchise nung House hearing?
Yes or no, sir?
In the first House hearing.
Pero yung pong NEA resource person noon at yung ERC resource person noon, tama po ba na hindi sila nag-object?
I cannot recall that with your kind indulgence, Madam Senator.
With the ERC? Can you answer Senator Rizzo's question?
Yes, Your Honor. We attended the last year hearing on the application of PECO extension of franchise, and we support the bill proposed by the House bill pertaining to the extension of PECO's franchise.
With the permission of Senator Rizzo, in the same breath, did you also support the application of more?
We are impartial, Your Honor, since there are two, during that time, Your Honor.
Just answer the question, sir. So you did too?
No, Your Honor. For more, we did not make any categorical statement that we support more. Since there are two applicants, More and PECO, we leave it to the discretion of the Congress as to whom will be the franchise will be granted, Your Honor.
For NEA, sir, did you interpose any objection or did you support the application of more?
Sir, I was not present during the first hearing in the House of Representatives.
Sir, I'm asking you now. Do you support the application of more if you didn't answer before?
I think
Wag niyo patayin yung
the
mic.
provision, let me clarify, Mr. Senator. The provision for electric service is a profound activity of every distribution utility. And to us, the utility that can provide the most efficient service at the lowest price should be the one to be considered. As of now, I have not seen the metrics with respect to the level of service of the existing franchise holder as well as the proposed, as well as the new applicant.
Perhaps later on, sir, we will allow more to make a presentation of what their commitments will be. But one of the pressing questions here is that, as you know, we cannot act on a particular franchise bill if it's not been transmitted from the House of Representatives. Hence, we are in a bind because if, let's say, PECO's franchise is not renewed and more comes in, what powers does or what authority does the government have, or what can the government do so that the distribution facilities will be assumed by the next franchise holder? Otherwise, there will be no electricity in Iloilo, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Is there a way that the government can compel PECO to sell maybe their facilities? And Senator Gatchalian, would you like to add to that particular question?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify things, no? Hindi po magkakaroon ng dalawang utility operator in Iloilo City. And the reason for that is because isa lang ang inakyat dito, more lang. Ang PECO hindi po inakyat dito. So we're now discussing more. Second, I don't think NEA will ever see more's business plan because NEA only regulates electric cooperatives. They don't regulate IOUs, investor-owned utilities. So the right entities to be asked is supposed to be ERC and also DOE. NEA po, electric co-ops lang ho sila, so hindi ho nila makikita ho talaga yung operations ng mga IOUs.
Correct. So this is directed to the ERC. Do you have any regulation? For example, the franchise of PECO has expired and a new player has come in. What can the government do so that services are not interrupted? Ano, expropriation? Paano?
Your Honor, that's the legal issue right now pending with the Commission. In the event that a new franchise will be granted to a new entity, there should be a seamless transition, Your Honor, for us to have a continuous supply of power.
Madam Chair, para dugtungan po yan, yung tanong ko, parang yung tanong ni Madam Chair kanina, anong mangyayari kung mag-expire yung franchise ng existing distributor, hindi ma-extend prior sa expiration nun? Paano masusuplayan ng kuryente yung mga mamamayan sa Iloilo? And sabi kanina, this is a profound matter. And just to appreciate how profound it is, yung interest ko rin sa matter na ito ay i-ensure na may continuity sa distribution ng power sa mga mamamayan sa Iloilo, whichever entity, or I was hoping at the start, entities are eventually awarded the franchises. So, clarify ni Chair Sherwin ng energy, iisa lamang under the iisa lamang. And as has been reported, Iloilo is one of the most progressive cities in the Philippines with one of the highest economic growth rates of any city in the country. Its 2017 growth rate of 8.7% is a significant contribution to the country's overall growth rate of 6.7%. So mas mataas pa. It seems a bit obvious, but as stated in a 2016 article by Wu, Huang, and Xin Yao on mdpi.com, electricity is a driving force of economic development, and the shortage of power supply seriously affects the healthy development of the economy and can cause large economic losses. So it would be unfortunate if the intramurals of our country's business and political elites inadvertently end up negatively affecting small business and ordinary citizens. And Madam Chair, hindi lang dalawang panig ang nandito. And there are various stakeholders at iba't ibang opinion, but I think the common concern is hindi maputulan o mahadlangan yung power supply sa Iloilo City.
Madam Chair, taking off from Senator Riza's statements and that of Senator Sherwin, I'll address this to PECO. A franchise bill is a local bill. The presumption is it's a local bill because the people in Congress who are direct district representatives know better than we do because we have a national constituency. So no franchise bill can emanate from the Senate. It has to emanate from the House. Exactly, it has to emanate from the House. Ang nakarating ngayon sa amin is the franchise application of MORE, which seeks to be a replacement, as you worded it, sir, DU in Iloilo. So I won't even go into the merits of why it should be granted to you and not to them, because the House made that determination already. It's out of our hands. We cannot grant you a franchise unless the House passes a bill granting you a franchise that we can put to a vote. So let me move forward. The issue is, how do we now go about it? And these are the concerns from my end. You are a private DU, is that correct? You own the assets, the poles, the transformers, the wires, the substations, everything. Would that be correct, sir? You're nodding your heads, yes. Here now comes a new entrant, and as stated earlier by both the ERC and NEA, and even by Senator Gatchalan, and even under PIRA, there should only be one. What will now happen? May I address this to PECO? If you are not granted a franchise, and apparently you were not granted a franchise by the House, there's nothing for us to act on. From your end, how do we go about this? Assuming you cannot convince the House anymore, and I think that's clear. They sent us the franchise of MORE. So how do we go through this transition from your point of view so that the consumers will not be affected adversely? Sir, please.
That is actually the primary concern of Panay Electric Company. The continuity of service in Iloilo City. So we filed our franchise application in July of 2017. more than a year before the application of more actually came about.
Sir, but ayaw nga eh. Ayaw nga ng house eh. Wala kami magagawa doon. So now, my question is, if we grant this franchise, how do we go about it? Clearly, this franchise is an eminent domain provision, which is actually unique for me. But how do we go about it? From your end, so you will file a case. You will stop them from exercising, assuming this is retained, the eminent domain provision. You will continue to operate until they haven't actually rolled out. Ganun, no? Meaning, magbabangayan kayo ng ganun? Ganun ang balak nyo?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, may I be allowed to? The thing is, I was chairman of the franchise committee for 6 years in the House. And I clearly remember that really a grant of a franchise is a privilege of government given to a applicant and not a right. And therefore, unfortunately, you guys were not able to convince the congressman that you had the right to run the utility for a period of years. For whatever reason, we don't have to go into anymore because I'm sure there are oppositors here and there are pro. It's going to be very bloody. So I agree with Senator Escudero that what do we do now so that the distribution of electricity in the area will not be disrupted, because our hands are tied. As I mentioned, I believe you visited me and I said, it's Congress that makes the decision, not us. It's a constitutional provision that all franchises together with the local bills are tackled in Congress, brought up to us here in the Senate. And so we have now the situation where we have more franchise with us here in the Senate. We have to make a decision, because if we do not also act on more, then therefore there will be no franchisee for that area, for the public utility, and it will be our fault pa na nagkaroon ng brownout sa Iloilo, and it will be a problem for the senators. Just to add to that point, Your Honor.
That's why Madam Chair was asking, because they will be well within their rights to act based on whatever their lawyers will advise to protect their interests too, and their property too. And so that, I hope you can be candid with us. So, ano ako ba balak nyo gawin? Assuming we grant the franchise, because that's the only pending franchise application before us. Assuming we grant it, what will happen next from your point of view? What will you do, sir? Please, sir.
Honorable Committee, this is our predicament. We are questioning House Bill 8302 precisely because we were never invited to the hearings of Congress when these were being deliberated. It took them 3 months from the date it was filed in Congress until approval. During those 3 months, PECO was never invited in these hearings. So how can we justify to Congress our position when we were never heard? Our application was submitted since July 22nd of 2017. Up to today, that application is frozen. Why?
Sir, again, as I said, given inter-chamber courtesy, we cannot go into the wisdom or lack of it of the House in choosing one franchise over the other.
Yeah.
My question, sir, is, given the situation where we are in right now already, that there is only one application and the issue is whether or not we will grant the application of more or not. If we grant it, what will be the actions that PECO will take? And how will it affect the continued delivery of services to the consumers?
Honorable
That's basically
Chairman,
my
I'll
question.
refer this to our legal.
Please, sir.
Chair, the kind indulgence of
Madam Chairman.
Sir, just one moment. Senator Gatchalian, you have something to add along these?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, barely 89 days till the franchise of PECO will expire. Tapos dadaan pa ho tayo ng Christmas. We have the longest Christmas celebration in the whole world. May New Year pa ho tayo. And then we will convene on November 12, I think. No? Senate will convene November 12, 13. And that's barely 78 days to approve this franchise. We have to consider that the timetable is January 19. That's when PECO's franchise will end. So,
kahit ano po sabihin ng PECO, for all intents and purposes, ang discussion ho natin should focus on more and also on the transition. Because wala ho tayo, PECO's franchise was not transmitted to us, and it's impossible for us to also compel our colleagues in the lower house to transmit it to us. So I think the question should be, or the answer should come from the Department of Energy, who should exercise general supervision and control over the power sector, and also ERC, who is the regulator of the power sector. Because my concern really is, how do you now energize 60,000 consumers in less than 78 days? That is my concern.
Madam Chair, actually that's always been a quandary for me. Can I ask PECO, do you have an existing legislative franchise? Legislative franchise, ah?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Existing one.
What's the existing one?
RA
RA what?
5360.
RA?
5360, which will expire January of 2019.
Sir, 5360 was in 1968. Di ba? Nag-expire noong 1994.
We were referring to that franchise given to us in 1994, sir,
By who?
by NEC.
By who?
NEC, National Electrification Commission.
No, that's my point. Your franchise RA number 5360 was granted in 1968, and by administrative, not legislative fiat, it was extended for another 25 years, which will last until next year. So that's why my question was, do you have a legislative franchise issued by Congress as of today? Or did your 5360 franchise, is that what you're tacking on to say that you have an existing franchise, although it was not Congress that actually extended it? Sir, please.
May I answer that question?
I'm confused. Eh?
Actually, during that time, the National Electrification Commission was authorized to grant and extend franchises. So it is a valid existing franchise, Your Honor,
So
up to today.
So
Or
it
up to
was,
January.
sorry, I wasn't born yet at that time. No, 1968, I was born in 69. So, when they grant, but, sir, if they can give a franchise, why did you even apply for a franchise in Congress and get the extension from NEC? So you mean to say at that time in 1994, which I doubt because that was under the new constitution already, in 1994, NEC can issue a franchise? Can extend a legislative franchise granted by Congress? It can at that time?
Is that
Sorry, I don't know.
Is that
It
correct?
was only
Mayor?
the PIRA that
That's a private.
restored the
To Congress.
to Congress, and the PIRA was passed in 2001, Your Honor.
And the successor in interest of NEC is NEA?
No, NEC is the commission, Your Honor. NEA is the administrative body regulating
Who is the
cooperatives.
successor in interest of NEC?
Well, insofar as franchises are concerned,
No, the body.
it will be Congress, Your Honor.
No. Hindi mo ba pag may na-abolish na office, nilipat yung function kung saan all the records are
The-
transferred?
I believe the NEC is still existing. Well, that could be confirmed by NEA.
Please,
That question.
please, sir, can you explain that?
Before the issuance of PD 269, the grant of franchises was vested in Congress. But by virtue or pursuant to PD 269, the grant renewal, cancellation, or modification of electric distribution franchises was vested in the National Electrification Commission. The Board of Administrators of the NEA, once it acts on applications for electric distribution franchises, is converted into a commission. And the Board of Administrators then became the commissioners. But pursuant to or by virtue of EPIRA, the power of NEA to grant franchises not only to electric cooperatives but also to private distribution utilities was reverted back to Congress.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, Chairperson, can I just interject there? So, 1994, there was already Congress, 1987. I know this because my father was also chairman of the franchise committee for 2 terms. They were giving out franchises already to VECO and the other utilities. So you're telling me now that the VECO franchise and the other franchises owned by private entities were granted by NEA and not by Congress?
May I?
You have to be clear with your answer.
Yeah, yes.
sir.
If you will recall, Senator Subiri, sometime in 2004 or 2005, the franchise certificate granted by NEA to BECO was questioned. And there was a legal opinion by then DOJ Secretary Tatu Manong as well as Perez that NEA had that authority, the power to grant franchises. But nonetheless, if you recall, Senator Sabiri, sir, I was present in your committee on legislative franchises in the House of Congress. Because they were saying, some members of Congress were saying that NEA had no longer had jurisdiction. But we insisted that we had. But with due respect to Congress, what happened in the case of BECO was BECO applied for a franchise in your in the House of Congress. And I remember I attended that franchise hearing, and you also granted a franchise for BECO. And the issue also in the case of Lanao, La Union Electric Company.
Administrator, no, I'd like to ask you, but the Constitution is very clear. Public utilities, the franchises for public utilities and electricity is a public utility, should go through Congress. And that is why the PD does not apply to this situation, because we already have the 1987 Constitution. Are you a lawyer, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay,
sir.
so I'm sure you know your Constitution.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very clear in the provisions of the Constitution that electric utilities have to get applications from Congress. And that is why we insisted that VECO apply for a congressional franchise. We insisted. Actually, I didn't know that PECO, with all due respect to the Cancho family, I'm close to some of your members, but I did not know that they were actually operating on an NEC franchise.
Actually, that's correct, sir. Actually, but during those times, nobody has questioned the power of authority of NEA. So much so that when the PIRA took into effect,
correct,
there is a provision there that 5 years from the effectivity of the PIRA, the NEA shall only entertain applications for renewal or cancellation of electric distribution franchise of electric cooperative. But immediately from the effectivity of the PIRA, we already relinquished. There is actually there is a provision in the PIRA that NEA should now relinquish. It was duly fully acknowledged during the time that the NEC was the authority in granting franchises. There are a lot of franchises which were granted by NEA, even for Meralco. I remember I was director for NEC just for 2 years, but I do remember that there are several franchises granted by NEC to even private utilities then.
But that's because nobody raised the issue. But in 2004, we raised the issue. That's why I remember it clearly. And that's, I'm caught blindsided here. I didn't know that you didn't have a congressional. I thought you had a congressional franchise. And therefore, following the VECO route where we had to make them apply for a franchise, PECO should have applied in the 1990s or in the early 2000s. After the, they should have applied to Congress.
You know what, Senator Zubiri?
I'm sure.
You know, I'm glad this fact came about. I mean, was discussed today. There's no question. You're right. In the Constitution, you're supposed to have a congressional franchise. So that in alone, I don't think we need to argue about this. Okay, you need to have a franchise from Congress, and that's going to be the problem now because you don't even have one. So legally and technically, I want to give you the chance, but with your indulgence also, Senator Chisa, we have here several groups that can speak of the services that were provided in Iloilo. Are there any oppositors to more so far? None. Okay. But there is here a cooperative with Ms. Lim, I think. Do you have like any manifestation? But we would like it only for 2 minutes because unfortunately some of our senators have to leave and we need to resolve this very, very quickly. So 2 minutes
Thank you,
only.
Madam Senator, member of this committee. I have a prepared statement which I forwarded to your secretariat. I will not read it anymore.
But
I
the
represent
gist.
the Iloilo Economic Development Foundation, which is a broad-based organization of professional business, plus the city and the governor, the mayor and the governor sit on our board. I am currently the chairperson. And all I want to say is that in 2010, because of all the brownouts in Iloilo and the seemingly lack of service of PECO, our foundation commissioned a study by a group in Singapore called WSP. And that study has been reviewed in 2018, so 8 years passed. We wanted to know what PECO had done during the 8-year period because many recommendations were made in 2010. And the conclusions are that, one, PECO's network reliability has improved. They have implemented many of the recommendations, but not in full. To bring it up to par, there should be an investment of about 500 million. There is a breakdown in this study. And all we ask is that whoever gets the franchise does good by the Ilonggos, because Iloilo is no longer the sleepy town that it was years ago. It is a vibrant city. We have a vision for it to be competitive, not only with cities in the Philippines, but cities in Asia. And so whoever gets the franchise should be able to share our vision and to give the service that we deserve. And this study, if I may recommend, in the public interest, be made a part of the franchise, and a covenant or a written commitment made by the franchisee or the new DU that they will implement these recommendations.
I'm glad that you invested in that study. That will certainly guide us also when we do our committee report. But I would like to ask also, because I always hear Attorney Alim, we had that hearing, and also Attorney Naba. Maikli lang po, sir, para lang marinig ng mga senators dito yung narinig natin nung nasa Iloilo tayo.
Maraming salamat po, Your Honors, Madam Chair. I have sent you all the complaints against PECO. Yan po ang sentiment ng mga tao doon, including the petition signature, nearly 30,000 po, about they are really opposing the renewal franchise. We have a resolution coming from the City Council vehemently objecting to the renewal of the franchise, plus complaint po, top 16 na po ito. Matagal complaints na address namin sa iyong iba sa ERC. So we have here the copy of the LBC, but allow me first just this one. This is very important. A communication sent to my office by a senior citizen. Malikli lang po with your indulgence, ma'am. The little very short read. I am Miss Mildred Harumalum, a resident of Barangay Sinikwa, Ilapos, Iloilo City. I would like to complain about my electric bill charged by PECO, Iloilo. Mine is a residential house with 3 regular occupants, and I am consumer PECO since 1984. Last March 15, 2017, I was amazed when I received my statement of account with a billing amount of 114,379 centavos. I am a senior citizen, a retired teacher, and since I received the billing charge from PECO, I cannot sleep and give me stress. I tried to contact PECO through Facebook, but I cannot connect to the office, so I was forced to go to the main office. The in charge of the billing told me to just pay the amount in installment, but I said that it's stupid to pay the amount when I did not use it. Prior to this big billing amount, my regular bill was only 3,000 pesos, ma'am. Plus all these bills, we paid on due date. We at home to save in using our electricity appliances so as to pay the amount that we can't afford. Then this thing happened. Signed,
Mildred Haruma home. I have here a copy. I've sent you the copy of that, ma'am. It's the very.
I remember you mentioned that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Attorney Nava, very quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do not know more from Adam. I do not know any one of them. But who cares? We rely on the wisdom of Congress. We rely on the wisdom of the senators. No to PECO. That's all that we want. Whoever will be granted franchise outside the PECO will be truly appreciated and we welcome it. But we firmly say, no to PECO, never again. For 95 years, they have been abusive, arrogant, they do not deserve a single moment to stay in the city of Iloilo. That is why we welcome more. We don't know any of them, but Iloilo City needs a power distributor utility who can address the concerns, who can be consumers friendly. All we want from Congress, particularly from Senate, is to have a franchise that is pro-consumers, that would include all our sentiments from the very start. I hope, ma'am, Iloilo City is no longer a Shabolay city. Unlike before. You were there. I was testifying in your committee on drugs. Iloilo City is moving forward non-stop. Please, spare Iloilo City from further harm. Give more, ma'am, the chance to prove its worth, but definitely no to PECO, never again.
You're still as passionate as ever, Attorney Nava.
Thank you for that, ma'am.
That's why I always like inviting you to my hearings. But I understand also the situation of PECO. Of course, if you're a public utility and then you provide service, there will always be complaints. Okay, but so we will give you a chance also to make a presentation. But
Madam Chair, forgive me. I'm sorry to Ms. Villana. Senator Sherwin was correct. This is not a franchise hearing about the renewal of a franchise application of PECO. That these complaints are relevant. It's the franchise application of more that nobody has any objections or complaints about. Because once we go there, then we go through the entire process of course, giving them their chance to talk, to explain. But even if we hear them both, it's not PECO's application that's on deck here, but Moore's application that's on deck. Again, my problem is if we go through that in depth, we will be obliged to hear the other side again. So the reason why I'm asking earlier, Madam Chair, yung franchise is on the transition. Kung wala naman palang congressional franchise ang PECO for the past 25, 24 years, at galing lang sa NEA, at wala namang kamong Supreme Court decision, di ba? As a policy ang Kongreso in-insist lang. That means to say, beyond the expiration of the extended franchise granted merely by NEA, PECO can operate until, if at all, more is in a position to run it already. But the issue is the assets. We are giving more the power of eminent domain, basically to take over their assets. Of course, subject to the payment of fair market value, to be determined by the courts. Actually, for me, that's the only issue. If we grant it to them, there's a legal way for them to do it, and hindi naman lugi technically ang PECO because the court will determine what the fair market value is. The difference is upon depositing 15% of the assessed value, they can already take over. Right, Mr. Well? Right?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
And that's what you intend to do if you're granted the franchise. You will file a case, deposit 15% of the assessed value of the poles, the wires, and everything, and take over.
Yes, Your Honor, because that is provided by law.
Wala pang law. Hindi pa namin kayo binibigyan ng eminent
If ever.
domain. If you're given eminent domain.
Yes.
If we do not give you the power of eminent domain, how will you go about it?
Your Honor, sir, it cannot be done if there is no eminent domain unless PECO agrees to sell to us. I'd like to say, sir, that eminent domain is an integral part of all franchises for distribution utilities. The only difference here is the specification that it will cover poles and the distribution assets.
Sir, I agree with you. All DUs have the power of eminent domain to take over land where they will put up the post. This is different. This eminent domain to actually take over the actual posts and the wire and the land upon which it stands. That's the basic difference, ha? The power of eminent domain is clearly provided for kasi alam ka namang hindi ka payagan magtayo ng poste ron, doon dadaan. But this is different, ha? You're talking about the DU assets.
That's correct. We made
And that is
it
unique
specific.
in that sense.
That's correct, Mr.
Basic question po. Sa power of eminent domain, inland, madali ho yung ma-value. No? You have zonal valuation, you have the LGU assessment. Ano ang improvements? Who will assess for the improvements?
No, it's the LGU because they pay, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, you pay real property taxes, right?
Yes, we do.
They pay real property taxes and there's a valuation.
But do they
based on
pay
that.
for the entire, for all the different assets that they have?
But it is not all the assets are assessed.
So kung hindi ho sila nagbabayad, wala hong assessed value, yung mga assets. Who will now assess? The court will determine the fair market value, correct? But normally that takes time. Normally that takes time. That takes years. We don't have years to determine the fair market value. So who will now assess?
No, because under the law, when you deposit 15% of the assessed value, you can take over. Now, Senator Sherwin is correct. What's the assessed value? Where will you base it on when the assets aren't really in the assessor's office?
Your Honors, under the franchise bill, the deposit is 100% of the assessed value, not just 50%. And we just followed.
100%, sir. What's the assessed value?
Sir,
Saan nakasulat yun?
sir, sa ERC mayroong inventory of properties. Nire-report nila niyan eh.
Sir, may inventory pero may value ba?
Yes, I think we have. Mayroon po. Mayroon po.
I believe, if I may interject, when you apply for rates, the ERC looks at your asset value because you know I'm familiar also with the power business. They assess the power, the right to pay your loans and all that. I mean the amounts for loan payments, assessed value, so that before you can come up with the rates, it is fair for the consumer and for PECO. Is that correct? Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
Your Honor.
So meron kayong listahan. You have a value.
Not
for
a
PECO.
list, Your Honor, but certain guidelines on how we value the assets. Usually, we adopt the, for cooperatives, we adopt the NEA guidelines on how to value the assets. And for private utilities, we apply the SKM valuation system, Your Honors. But there's no specific value for each of the assets, Your Honor. Usually, in the past, Your Honor, when we are on the RORB regime, we required a third-party evaluator to value the assets of all distribution utilities, Your Honor.
In this case, did you hire a third party for PECO?
None, Your Honor. We just rely on these guidelines, Your Honor.
Can I, Madam Chair, may I be allowed to continue? Madam Chair, I may be allowed to continue and ask. I'd just like to ask on the more side. There are accusations on other people, on your part, that you have no background whatsoever in energy production or distribution. But I recall, Mr. Castro, Roel, you are part of the W. Brown group, right? So you have power, you're part of the power industry because you have, you're an IPP. Is that correct, the company?
Well, Honorable Chair and members, yes, that's correct. A. Brown actually has interest in power generation, which owns 20% of Pump Concepcion Power Corporation, a 135 megawatt plant based in Iloilo. We're also 20% owner of aggregate of about 55 megawatts of embedded generation in Mindanao. Other than that, well, personally, I was also, well, together with our chairman, Dr. Brown, we were also part of the National Grid
Yes,
Corporation.
I
of the
recall. That's why I was
Philippines.
going to raise that, because when you applied for NGCP franchise, you were in our hearings. So therefore, you are familiar with transmission, because you together with the group, the people behind MORE had bought or privatized NGCP from government hands. Is that
Yes, Your Honor. Well, I would like to say that my experience actually started from valuation of assets of Transco when we put up the bid, all the way securing the franchise from the lower house and the Senate, all the way to the turnover from PISAM and the operations of National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, Mr. Chair.
So it's not true that you guys are coming in blind and you do not know the industry.
Yes, I would like to say that that's very inaccurate. No? In fact, part of our team is that we have former general managers of electric co-ops who are actually 4 or 5 times bigger than the franchise of Iloilo. No? With a very good track record of bringing down systems losses from double digit down to the regulated systems loss, as mandated by the ERC. No? So,
Mr. Castro, very quickly, so that we can move along also with your indulgence, Senator Zubiri. So obviously you wouldn't apply for this franchise if you did not make your own assessments also of, number one, how much it will cost, and number two, the current assets of PECO. So do you have more or less an idea how much that will be if you have to take over? Because you have to give the 15%, am I correct, down payment, diba? So that the government can apply eminent domain, sir.
Again, Madam Chair, thank you for that question. Yes, we're very much aware of that. In fact, what we're proposing is a 100% deposit. And we are basing it on the audited financial statement of PECO way back, I think, 2017.
That can be the basis of the courts also to determine the amount of the assets.
I would like to say yes, because that's a public document. It's that's an assessment.
Do you mind telling us how much it is?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that's about 430 million pesos distribution assets of.
So the
PECO.
infrastructure that they put up, etc., or.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, that's how we understand that line of 430 million as the assets, the distribution assets of PECO.
But how much is more willing to invest?
Yes, ma'am.
How
Actually,
much more? Aside from the existing assets, just to upgrade the facilities, which is actually sinasabi, may mga complaints ka, madapuan ng ibon, brown, I don't know if that's true. Ikaw nagsabi nun, di ba?
Yes.
Saranggola. So, paano? Magkano yung investment ninyo?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I have a presentation for that, but if we don't have the time, we are actually ready to invest 700 million in the next 3 to 5 years, not to improve the reliability, to bring down the system's losses, to improve the capacity, so forth and so on. So in our program, of course, subject to the ERC approval, we are ready actually to deploy about 700 million in the next 3 to 5 years, which is 200 million above the findings of ILED.
And now MORE has the capitalization for this, the 700 million, or will you?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, right now, our authorized capital is 1 billion. Okay. And, we started with about 67, 68 million, but our principals already put in additional.
Who are your principals?
Well, actually, it's Monte Oro. No? Monte Oro, well, of course,
who's Monte Oro again?
Monte Oro is owned by Apex Mining. So we have, they have already infused 2 billion pesos in our bank account right now.
So you have the financial capability. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So what we will ask from you is to submit your plans and proposals, because as we present the committee report to the committee, this will be part of the attachment. I mean, the basis for this. And with the indulgence also for the senators here, I know that the issue now is not anymore. It's just really the franchise for MORE. Kasi that's the only one that was transmitted to us. But I'd like to give also PECO the courtesy to explain their side. And maybe because they were mentioned in the discussion, what improvements have you done? And yet, maybe answer some of the allegations, even just for the record. So can we have Mr. Cacho comment, or whoever would like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for giving us this opportunity to air our side of this issue. This morning, the owners of the franchisee, Panay Electric Company, or PECO for short, which purchased, built up, installed, and has operated the comprehensive electric power distribution facilities and network in the franchise area of Iloilo City for the past 95 years, come before this honorable committee to oppose House Bill 8302 for the following factual and easily verifiable events. First, like I mentioned earlier, More Minerals Corporation, a mining company with a paid-up capital then of only $2.5 million, with absolutely no experience and no track record of electric power distribution, on the day it filed its House Bill on August 22, 2018, a mere 2 months ago. Consider this, honorable members of the committee. PECO filed a petition for the extension of its franchise on July 22nd, 2017. That's more than a year ago, and up to now, it remains frozen. Second, today at this very moment, More still has absolutely no assets, no equipment, no skilled employees in the electric power distribution business existing on the ground in Iloilo City, as the Articles of Incorporation of More to amend its primary purpose on mining was approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission only on September 21st. Third, during the September 25th, 2018 hearing, More failed to present a comprehensive year-to-year rollout plan for the congressmen, the oppositors, and the public to scrutinize and evaluate. Instead, More merely relied on the grant of the power of eminent domain to expropriate and confiscate the assets and business of the current franchisee in favor of More, a private entity, thereby giving More unwarranted benefits to the damage of PECO, its employees, with years of dedicated service to Iloilo City and its stockholders. Fourth, the bill now in consideration before this body was never subjected to legitimate public hearings, as no sufficient prior notices or invitation were sent to the residents, consumers, stakeholders, and the existing and prior operator by the chairman of the Lower House Committee on Legislative Franchise. Madam Chair, in conclusion, I would like to pass the floor to the President of PECO, Miguel Cacho. Thank you.
Sir, I will give you 2 minutes.
Okay. PECO is only one of the 5 distribution utilities out of 147 DUs awarded by the Distribution Management Committee of ERC with a 100% compliance of its standards. 2, in the WSP Global Study, a Singaporean power technical consultant hired by the ILED, they cited PECO for having significantly improved its reliability of power of service from 2010 to the present. We are in fact in the top 15% in terms of reliability performance countrywide, and this is in the records of ERC. And in 2014, DOE cited PECO for its contributions to the successful hosting of APEC in Iloilo City. Iloilo's enviable economic growth and progress has shown to what extent PECO has partnered with the city in bringing about this phenomenal movement. Big investors are partnering with PECO, like Mega World, SM Development Corporation, Ayala, SM Group, the Villar Group, and so on. So many are coming in, partnering with us, and putting up their new big customer enterprises because of their confidence in PECO. I would like to also read the statement by Rani Ocampo of PEPOA, who is an expert in the industry. PECO is one of the main reasons why Iloilo City in recent years is one of the top performing cities in the country. Its ability to support big investors in terms of their power requirements is seen in the massive growth of the city in recent years. The city of Iloilo, because of this, brings high economic returns to the Philippines and continues to do so. It does not make sense at all to change that growth negatively by granting more an electric distribution franchise which has no expertise to run such a business. The country now more than ever needs its top-performing cities to produce better economic growth due to the massive infrastructure projects about to be undertaken by the present administration. The Philippines cannot afford the city of Iloilo to go backwards by railroading a top-performing electric distribution utility in PECO. And lastly, Honorable Senators, the 35 calendar days that it took the lower franchise committee to approve the House Bill of More without conducting legitimate, honest, and transparent public hearings with the presence of the residents, business establishments, consumers, and other stakeholders should be a compelling enough reason for this Honorable Senate to return this bill to the lower house for the proper and correct evaluation in the interest of the citizens of Iloilo, whose progress and welfare will be most affected by this decision in the next 25 years. Finally, I come before you now just in behalf of an enterprise whose business is now being threatened, and also in behalf of constituents whose rights are being usurped through maneuverings done in blatant disregard of the principles of justice. I come as an Ilonggo, 30 years of service in the company, with genuine love for a city on whose soil the blood, sweat, and tears of generations in our family that have come before may have fallen. I have a whole litany of events, if you may want to, but I will not get into that. Our efforts have been done with rectitude of intention despite our human limitations. All we ask is that Iloilo and the rights and welfare of all Ilonggos be given the protection that is due them. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cacho. I can understand perhaps your frustration because of not having your franchise heard yet or renewed in the lower house. However, the current situation is it's not here with us now. And as you mentioned in your statement, you care for the Ilonggos. You are yourself an Ilonggo with blood and sweat invested, or sweat at least. But it's a public utility, and if you really care, eventually it will boil down to, if more gets the franchise, that you will have to either turn over your assets, of course, after being properly compensated. This is the situation, and I hope that you will come to an agreement that will be beneficial to you and most especially to our constituents in Iloilo. Ms. Javellana, before I think there's going to be a motion already soon.
Madam Chair, let me just reiterate. Right now, we have no choice but to tackle the franchise of more. Kahit marinig man natin yung mga sinasabi po ng PECO, wala na sa kamay po natin to. But my concern here actually, and this can be addressed by the government officials, is we have barely 89 days till the franchise will end. Ito po yung concern po natin. And that's why I really want to hear from the Department of Energy as well as the ERC on what is the timeline and activities that more needs to undertake in order to have power or to deliver power to the homes by January 19. Kasi the time, kalaban na ho natin dito oras no? And wala pa ho silang prangkisa. No? After that, the way to take over is expropriation. And in my opinion po, there are also question marks in the mode of expropriation na gagawin po ng more. What my fear is, it might lead to a lot of litigation. No? TROs might be filed in several aspects. If that happens, kawawa po ang tao ng Iloilo, wala pong kuryente. No? Hindi natin makokontrol yung TROs, ma'am. No? Anong gagawin ho natin? What are the remedies that DOE and also ERC can present so that on January 19, may kuryente po sa Iloilo City?
DOE, you care to comment?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. On the part of the Department of Energy, of course, we would like to note that on our part, we don't want any disruption on the services. So we would like to suggest that a transition period be provided until a new franchise is granted to anyone, and then of course we will also suggest that in the franchise we would also suggest that an automatic if a new grant is provided with the franchise, we would also suggest that automatic divestment of the assets is provided in the franchise.
Madam Chair, I have a basic question sa DOE. Supportado niyo ba itong more?
Not really. We are not.
DOE kayo, you exercise general supervision and control over the power sector. So dapat meron kayong position dito. Anong position niyo sa more?
Sir, on the part of the Department of Energy, we don't want actually to provide favors on anyone, but
no, your position should favor the people of Iloilo.
Yes, sir.
So ano yung pinaka maganda para sa kanila?
Siguro, sir, bigyan natin ng transition period po, yung kung halimbawa.
So ano nga yung detalye ng transition period?
Alam muna natin yung present grantee ay yung PECO.
But that's already too late. Wala na tayo doon
Until such time po na mai-grant po
wala na ho tayo sa PECO. So ngayon, pinag-uusapan na natin ni Moore, ano ba yung mga detalye ng timetable na hindi mawawalan ng kuryente by January 19?
Madam Chair, Sir Tony mentioned it earlier. It's a transfer of assets.
Yes, sir. Automatic
Can you elaborate on that?
Sir, ang suggestion po sana ng Department of Energy is to grant yung pang magkaroon po ng automatic divestment po kung magkakaroon na po ng bagong franchise para po lahat na nakalagay na po doon sa Franchise Act yung anumang action na susunod.
I think this is quite crucial. I'm a little disappointed with the representation from both the DOE and the ERC. I think as we move forward, because we have to be able to decide quickly, as suggested earlier, that there be a technical working group for us to be able to prepare for the transition, yes. So we will ask, please, tell your principal, Secretary Cusi, to join our technical working group, as well as, who's your chairman now? Ms. De Vanadera, correct?
Chairman
Attorney De Vanadera. To be there, hindi pwede parang nakikinig lang kayo dito, wala naman kayong contribution. Bakit kayong pinadala? Are you even familiar with this particular issue or not? Do you know how many people will be affected? If your principals think that this is not crucial, then they're either not aware of what their responsibilities are, or they're not effective, or they just don't really care. They should have been here today. We sent them an invitation. Or at the very least, you should have been apprised of the situation. Anyway, I think we'll hear one last from Ms. Avellana, and then we will have to.
Good afternoon po. Chairwoman, before po, kasi right now we're talking about the franchise of, more, yung pagbigay ng franchise. But being a consumer, dapat po sana na malaman, kasi we're in this tug of war ng away nila between, right now we don't know kung paano yung assets nila mabibigay. We already sent our position paper in your office po. Now we have also our demands from the consumers bago sana po mabigay yung franchise sa more. Like for example, we also wanted that if in case it will be given to more, how can we get our refunds and our meter deposits sa PECO? Paano po namin makukuha yon as consumers? Kasi it's been 95 years na po sila, and there is a pending, I don't know, kailangan pa po natin yun, ma'am, na i-audit muna because there is a 630 plus million refund. And we don't know until now if it's already exhausted or not.
To the consumers?
Yes, overbilling po.
630 million?
Overbilling. We have an
We have,
overbilling
ma'am,
case. So
there's a case
until,
filed.
yes,
So will
po.
it be assumed by more is one thing. Diba?
I don't know. That's why we are in a limit.
It's not it. Technical, okay, we need to have you in the technical working group. I think Senator,
Madam Chair,
Senator
just
Gatchalian.
again, I just want to give very specifics. Kahit ma-approve ho natin yung franchise after November 12, ang ERC kailangan ho mag-issue ng CPCN. And they normally take, what, 90 days for CPCN? More than 90 days to issue a CPCN. So lalampas na ho tayo ng January 19. So, quasi-judicial, Your Honor, we are quasi-judicial body, Your Honor. In any case, ma'am, these are the details that we need to iron out one by one. My point of the matter, Madam Chair, is really there's more than approving the franchise. The details are the most important that follows. And we have to remember, 89 days na lang ho tayo from this point. Wala na ho silang kuryente. No? So we need to really knock down the details one by one.
But I think you're right pointing that out. But you can have them on this provisional permit. In fact, they don't even have a congressional permit and they're operating. So, I mean, it's better that they continue to operate until such time that it's resolved. I think it's also both an economic interest as well as a service interest to you. And I think PECO will do that. Am I correct? The catchers
Definitely.
See, we have a commitment that for as long as this is not ironed out, PECO will not abandon their clients.
We assure to provide service to Iloilo no matter what.
Oh, okay. Well, that's reassuring.
We're amenable to that.
Yeah,
So,
okay
Madam
naman,
Chair,
diba? So mag-friends na kayo dyan after.
Madam Chair, probably the best thing to do is now convene a technical working group wherein we have Secretary Cusi as member, Madam Agnes de Venadera as also a member, together with the members of the committee, and probably you can get also, oh yes, of course, okay. That's my motion, Madam Chair, so that we can make sure that the amendments made to the franchise will be such that definitely the refunds to the consumers will be paid. The refunds, the meters that they have paid will also be paid back to the consumers, and all these safeguards, no? Madam Chair, and of course to tackle the issue on the valuation also of PECO, to make sure that they are properly compensated. We will definitely not agree to a takeover without a proper compensation if that is the case. Madam Chair, and of course, I believe the ERC would like to add.
Yes, before I act on the motion of Senator Miggs. Go ahead.
Your Honor, on the part of the ERC, this is the prime consideration under the table of the ERC, and ERC is always guided by the principle that we have to ensure the best interest of the consumers, Your Honor. And we can assure that there will be continuous, reliable supply of electricity even if the Congress will not grant PECO's franchise. We are studying right now, Your Honor, whether the ERC has the authority to grant a provisional CPCN or allow PECO in the meantime, that we are waiting for more franchise, to be on a holdover capacity just to continue the operation of electricity in Iloilo, Your Honor. That is the prime consideration now we are studying with the ERC, Your Honor. We will come up with our resolution on whether or not, since PECO has a pending application of CPCN, we are studying now whether we can allow, in the meantime, a provisional CPCN or on a holdover capacity come the expiration of its franchise, Your Honor.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
before you act on the motion of Senator Zubiri, I'll make an amendment to his motion and I'll preface it with a statement. We can provide in the bill, correct me if I'm wrong, as suggested by DOE, for a transition, granting PECO that provisional CPCN or authority in the transition, and based on the principle of unjust enrichment, that if they are the ones operating and running it, they should be compensated and not more. We should also take up in the TWG who will assume the liabilities of PECO, kasi in eminent domain mo na nga, tapos yung utang kanila pa rin, then sakit naman nun, pumasok sa isang bulsa, ilalabas din pala nila. We can provide for a system or mechanism whereby payments will either go directly already to the consumers by way of refund, and only the balance will be given to them, or that will be part of the premium to be paid by more, as the case may be. And with all of this, sir, although Senator Sherwin Gatchalian would not want any litigation, but you will be well within your rights to question the act of both the House and or the Senate before the courts of law. You're well within your rights outside of the proceedings on eminent domain, and we're not taking that away from you. So with that being said, may I amend the motion of Senator Zubiri? Given the time is of the essence as pointed out by Senator Gatchalian, I have no objection to the motion forming a TWG, but may I ask that we amend the motion for us to approve in principle the application of more, subject to a TWG that will address all of these issues so that we will not be further delayed with respect to acting on this application, especially given the fact na kayong mga re-electionista mga na next year. So for us to act along those lines and in that direction. So may I amend the motion?
I accept the amendment, Madam Chair, and we second the motion.
I just also to make a clarification. Yes, it's true, but more important is I'm from Iloilo also. So I want to make sure that service will not be interrupted, and I am assured by, I think, a very sincere commitment from the Cachos that they will not leave them alone. So and this process will take longer. ERC said it will take 90 days. So I don't know, it will be quite a miracle, in fact, if there will be a transition within next year. I mean, when you think about it, so you might very well still be acting on that provisional permit given to you. Also, with that, we will form the technical working group, but we've already approved in principle the motion for a franchise for more. Am I correct? That is for everyone.
May I also ask that we invite PECO in the TWG so that in the transition they will not be unfairly treated,
Okay.
and whatever concerns they have can be addressed in the actual law and not through any future regulations that either DOE or ERC may or may not issue.
I agree with that,
Thank you,
Senator.
Senator.
Yeah, thank you for making that motion.
Madam Chair, napakinggan ko po yung sabi ng ERC, provisional, ilang years ba yan? Ilang years?
Hanggang sa matapos lang yung pag-a-assume ng more dun sa mga assets.
In behalf of the people of Iloilo City at mga consumers, thank you very much, the committee. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilor Alim, Councilor Nava. Walang disruption yung ano natin. And of course, Ms. Lim, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Avellana. We have to...
Since Mr. Castro said that they're willing to spend 700 million within 3 to 5 years, and the study says at least 500 million, may I just request that this study be considered by more if they are granted?
I think you already made that manifestation. We will present that to the technical working group. So please, thank you for sharing that with us. I will direct the committee staff to please secure a copy for the technical working group.
Madam Chair, with your permission, ma'am, we can even go a step further. Based on your study, we can include in the actual franchise that they should spend that amount. And that if they do not, that will be a ground to revoke the franchise, given their commitment.
We would be very happy.
Madam Chair,
if
we
that
can
happened.
also, just a suggestion, we can also include the other measures that DOE and ERC uses, for example, frequency of brownout, frequency of duration of brownout, because these are the things that they are complaining about.
Correct.
You know, so in order to make sure that the new utility will perform far better than the old utility, then we can specify some form
Benchmarks
of
also.
benchmarks and measurements.
Yes. Correct. Okay.
Madam Chair, lastly po, kasi we were invited also, merong hearing sa Wednesday about the application of PICO CPCN. We'll be coming back again on Wednesday because tomorrow we have also our session, the City Council. But there was already a notice given by the ERC sa Iloilo City Council kasi siya po ang floor leader. So we'll go again on tomorrow sa Wednesday.
Okay.
No more, sir, I think, because correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Your power to grant a CPCN is a delegated power by Congress. It is, di ba, attorney?
Yes, Your Honor.
So Congress can actually grant it directly on its own through the franchise. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. It's always predicated, CPCN is always predicated on the franchise, Your Honor.
Exactly. So we can provide it here already.
Yes.
The provision for a CPCN, either for PECO in the transition and also for PECO in the transition.
Yes, Your
Sir,
Honor.
they set it on Wednesday. You have a notice.
Yes, Your Honor. It's the application of
Ituloy ba yun?
PECO for a CPCN, renewal of its CPCN, Your Honor. But as I've said, it's always predicated on the franchise, Your Honor. But we have to do the processing of hearing.
You can postpone the hearing after
Yes.
the end of the technical working group so that it's clear, the parameters of the CPCN be given to it.
Ano po, I want to know, Madam Chair, kung matuloy yan sa Wednesday, para hindi kami balik dito, Iloilo pa kami. Dako eh.
Dako na yan.
Personal gasto.
Wag na, i-postpone na ninyo yung hearing na yan kasi...
Unless naghahanap kayo ng dahilan lumuwas talaga ng Maynila.
Hindi po.
Ayaw namin nga eh.
Ayun na.
Magasto din sa amin.
Oo.
Ano?
And we are mandated po kasi under the IPRE to process this CPCN.
And the ease of doing business bill for them to hear it.
So, ano
Okay,
pa?
you know what? Resolve it among yourselves after this hearing. Okay.
Madam
Move to holier matters because
Yes.
we may move to the next item of the agenda.
Yes, Senator Miggs, in fact, the reputation of the CBCP as well as the other Tirad Pass, we already know that they performed the service, that they were granted the privilege to have that franchise. Maybe we'll just get a clarification from the SEC, the KBP, and the NTC if there are any violations or if there are any objections to the renewal of their franchise. This shouldn't take long.
Madam Chair, I just, if I may be allowed on the onset, because I have another appointment at 2 p.m. But I'd just like to put on record that I'm in 100% in favor of the approval of franchise of CBCP, and I do not know Tirad Pass.
I don't know.
Saan ba yung Tirad Pass?
Ilocos.
Ay, sa inyo ba? Eh, di, wala na rin akong problema. 110% approval. As long as they comply with all the requirements submitted to the SEC, the NTC, and to the other government agencies, they have my full support and vote, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I convert the manifestation of Senator Zubir into a formal motion because I know all people named Francis are by nature good. So with Father Francis here, Eric nga lang yung isa, but may make an omnibus motion. May make an omnibus motion for the approval of both pending franchises.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that SEC, the BIR, the KBP has no objection.
Madam
Or
Chair.
you have no, as long as there's no pending BIR case or SEC case? SEC?
On behalf of the SEC has no objection on both the applicant, CBCP and TRED Pass. In fact, they are deemed compliant with all the reportorial requirements and have been issued by, a certificate of good standing. Both for TRED Pass, it's the certificate.
It's
is
okay.
dated.
You can just submit
Yes.
for the record. Thank you, ma'am. Attorney Oralbal.
If Father Francis will bless the KPP, we have no objection, Your Honor. Also with TIRAD,
Alright.
we have no objection.
Yeah. Okay. And also for TIRAD Pass, I've been there. I know it's actually in existence. They've been using that franchise for community service as well. And so we thank you for your continued service to the people, as long as there are certain provisions that we have now in the franchise that you will hire people from the locality where you're set up. The public service is also paramount. There will be the emergency alerts for natural calamities and disasters, and you will allow also for government time for public service. With that said, I will agree on the NTC, any pending problems with them, objections?
Your Honor, we fully support the renewal of the franchises of TIRAD Pass and the CPCP, Your Honor.
Okay then. So there was a motion to approve the franchise for TIRAD Pass and CBCP, and with that motion, it was already approved, yes. We approved that motion. So congratulations. And to everyone here who attended this hearing, the hearing on this particular hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.